All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Toch, and on this channel, I make content about my experience throughout the software development industry. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my experience interning at Microsoft for back-to-back summers for the past 2 years. So I'll talk a bit about the first internship I did, which was the Explore internship back in 2020, but I'll probably mostly focus on the internship that I just completed, the software engineering internship for the summer 2021. So the first time that I actually applied to Microsoft, I think it was probably back in 2016. I was a freshman at college at this time. A bunch of my friends who were, taking higher level computer science classes than me were applying to places like Microsoft and the big tech companies, etc., and so I thought, you know what, birds of a feather, so I thought I'd try my hand. So I applied also through their website. I'm not sure if I applied directly or if someone gave me a referral. I believe somebody might have given me a referral, now that I think about it. So through the referral, I applied, but sadly, when the recruiter hit me back, long story short, she pretty much just said, yeah, you don't have enough experience, your skills aren't good enough, yada yada yada, try again next time, good luck next time type stuff. Now obviously she didn't say it in those words, she used much nicer words, but that's pretty much the summary of what her email back to me said. So fast forwards 2 years where I spent out of college, including a decent amount of time where I was building a lot of, or a good amount of real world software engineering experience. I came back to college in the fall of 2019. So I met a guy who's now a friend of mine. I met him through a campus student organization that we're both a part of. I remember one day we were sitting in the lounge because we have a student lounge. And then, we were just talking. I guess we were talking about his internship experience at Microsoft because he had just completed a summer internship at Microsoft that year. And then I'm not sure if I explicitly asked him, but knowing myself, I probably did explicitly ask him, or maybe he just offered to give me another referral. But however that went, I ended up getting a referral from him. And then a couple weeks later, I was reached out to by a recruiter. A couple weeks after that, it was time for interviews. But shortly after the final round interviews happened in Seattle, a few weeks later, I was given the offer for an internship, a summer internship for 2020. But moving on, so the internship eventually starts, and shortly after that, I'm introduced to my pod mates, as they call them. So it was two other interns from different schools each that I would be working with throughout the summer internship, and we were all on the Edge team. And Edge is like a pretty large team, and there's different sub teams underneath it, and we were on a specific sub team. I'm not sure if I can mention the team names, so just to make sure that I'm not breaching any NDAs or anything like that, I won't mention any team names. But yeah, I was on a team with two other interns, and we worked on a project together. I'm not even sure if I can mention the project that we worked on, just because I'm not trying to break no NDAs. But we worked on a project. It involved us having to write code and working inside of the Edge browser code base, which is a gigantic, I've never seen so much more code anywhere else in my life, but other than working at Microsoft. And I've worked at a few different places, and Microsoft Edge by far takes the cake in terms of like volume of code. But anyways, so fast forward 12 weeks, and the Explore internship was over. I remember, as part of the project, by the end, we usually do a project presentation in front of a bunch of stakeholders and members of the larger Edge team, etc. And I remember the day before my final performance review meeting with my manager, who wanted me to demo my project for him. And so the night before, I had tested everything out. It was working perfectly, no hiccups at all. And then while I was trying to demo it to him, it just wouldn't work. And the final meeting is necessary to happen before your manager decides whether or not he's going to give you a recommendation for a return offer. So you can imagine how stressed and anxious and just terrified I was in that meeting where, the work I was supposed to be doing all summer, I've been doing, but just chose not to work in when one of the moments where it mattered the most, probably the moment where it mattered the most. And so my manager, was like, okay, cool, let's just take a breather, pause. He gave me like 2 days to fix whatever issue was wrong and said we would have the meeting again. I think we were supposed to have it, I think it was on a Tuesday. And so that's when the mistake happened. And then he told me we'd reschedule it to Thursday. So when I tell you that those 2 days were the most stressful days of that entire summer, those 2 days were the most stressful days of that entire summer. Luckily, I was able to pull it off. And then when we had the meeting again on Thursday, it worked without a hiccup. It was all good. And then when I finally did, me and my other 2 team members, we finally did our grand presentation in front of like the entire Edge team, or at least a large portion of it. It went well. It was great. I think we did a really good job. A lot of people said we did a good job. We did a good job, and it went well. And at the end of the day, thank God, I got the return offer, and I was feeling good. So fast forward another 2 semesters of school, and we're right back to the ending of spring of 2021, the start of summer 2021, and I was again getting ready to this time begin the SWE internship, software engineering internship. So this time around, I can go into more detail about my SWE internship. The project that I worked on this time around is a lot closer to the open source community. And a lot of the things that I did this summer, well, not a lot of the things, but parts of the things that I did this summer, and a lot of the things that my team does do is out there on the web for anybody to find. So throughout my description of my project from henceforth, I'm only going to talk about things that are publicly available information or things that you can see publicly. So now the team that I was working on was in charge of a product called Webview 2. So Webview 2 is a feature that's part of the Edge browser, which is made for third-party developers. So by that, I mean, it's not for customers and consumers. Well, it's for customers, but not for consumers in the sense of people who use browsers to, I don't know, shop or, look up stuff, apply for stuff, visit websites, etc., etc. It's not for those kind of customers. Rather, it's for developers who want to build hybrid applications. And so what is a hybrid application, you might ask? Well, they come in a bunch of sizes and flavors, but really from my understanding, what a hybrid application is simply an application that you have a single code base, which produces an application that's capable of running on multiple platforms. And so a lot of times that single code base might comprise of, maybe one set of technologies, like for example, web technologies, or it can comprise of multiple set of technologies. Like you can have some native technologies, native is relative to the platform that it's running on, mixed in with some web technologies, mixed in with some other stuff. The whole goal for hybrid apps is to increase developer productivity. So that means they're trying to allow developers to write one code base, write an app once, and then have it run on multiple different platforms rather than the conventional alternative of, building the same app multiple times for different platforms. And so Webview 2 is one of Microsoft's approaches towards allowing third-party developers to be able to build hybrid applications on top of Microsoft Edge. So it's pretty much just a runtime environment which exposes a bunch of browser APIs and allows developers to embed web content into their applications. So for example, let's say you're a developer and you already have a web application that's up and running, but you decide, okay, you want a Windows application. You want to make it a native Windows application as well. One thing you could do is you can go ahead and just rebuild the entire application for some specific version of Windows or multiple versions of Windows. So compatibility across Windows versions is also a challenge that you have to overcome, right? Or you can use something like the Webview 2 control, and it will allow you to be able to reuse a lot of the code and a lot of the features that you have on your web app and pretty much bring it into a native environment by allowing it to be wrapped around by Microsoft Edge essentially, or more specifically by Webview 2. And so the benefits of taking such an approach would be that, your app would be compatible across all the versions of Windows which Webview 2 is compatible on, and which Edge essentially is compatible on, which is pretty much maybe all of them, if not all of them, a lot of them, or at least, the most relevant versions anyways that you would want to build for. And once they get Mac support up and running, it'll also be compatible on Mac as well. So imagine that you write essentially one single code base and you're able to run it on all these multiple platforms and multiple versions, etc., etc. And so that's as far as I'm going to go towards explaining what Webview 2 is, what it does, etc., etc. If you want to know more, read the documentation. So moving on to what my role on this team was. So throughout the entire summer, I worked on two features, which is pretty much adding two new APIs to this Webview 2 control. So the first of which was an API which allows third-party developers to tap into the browser status bar feature or system. So allowing them to pretty much get the messages that are being shown on the status bar at any given time. So in case they wanted to create their own custom status bar within their application, they can do that. Or if they wanted to, save the status bar messages for their logs or something like that, they could also do that as well. And the second feature which I worked on was something similar, but for the favicon instead. So allowing developers to access the favicon of the current web page and also notifying them whenever it changes so they can refetch the new one. So for both of those features, I was responsible for doing a couple of things. The first of which was pretty much just talking to my project manager and making sure that I had a good idea of what was expected for the feature, which also involved me reaching out to the customers who made the request and, just asking clarifying questions, etc., etc. So once I had a good enough idea of exactly what the customers wanted, the next thing to do was to design or create an API design doc. Which I did, and pretty much introducing what the feature is, what it does, and providing a bunch of sample code of how the feature can be used, and then providing some API details at the bottom. So pretty much a README for any feature that you've seen on GitHub. When you're looking at docs, pretty much a README I had to create for both of those new APIs. And so after the API design doc was done, the next step was to go ahead and implement the feature. So I had to go through the code base and find the right places, or the places which made the most sense to hook the feature into so that the API would work. And so figuring that out took a lot of conversations with my mentor, as well as another intern who was on the team who was doing a project that was similar to mine, but he started like a few weeks earlier. And just, reaching out to other team members whenever either my mentor was unavailable, and just, asking for help, screaming for help. So throughout the internship, I faced a good number of challenges. I feel like that goes without saying, at a company as big as Microsoft, and working on a product as big as Edge and as complicated as Edge, you're bound to face lots of complications and challenges. But I think the biggest challenge for me was working with their Win32 sample application. So pretty much because my team provided a bunch of APIs for other developers to use, we also have the responsibility of showing them how to use those APIs, which is where the sample application comes in. And so there's two sample applications, one for each of the SDKs that they expose for developers. So Win32 and .NET. So Win32 is C++ based, and it's used for building native Windows applications. .NET used for similar purposes, but it's based on C#. And so, yeah, I struggled the most in the Win32 application just because it was very foreign to me. I've never ever built an application with a framework like that. The paradigm was so very different. Like, for example, when composing user interfaces, it used an imperative system, and I'm very much used to declarative frameworks like React, Flutter, etc., etc. And so adjusting to the new environment and trying to read Windows documentation, figuring out how to use what function to do what, etc., etc., I found that to be very challenging. Many times I'd reach out for help to some of the senior devs, get on one-on-one team calls, figure stuff out, or get on like hour-long calls with my mentor, just trying to figure out, okay, how to debug, how to do this, how to do that, etc., etc. But in the end, I was able to successfully build out those two APIs and get them to a staging phase. Towards the end, I was able to begin taking the status bar API from stage staging to experimental, and then the next level after that is stable, where it's safe for all developers to use on Webview too. And so after in my last few weeks, I went ahead and did the final presentation. I presented in front of like similar to the one that I did in 2020, in front of a bunch of people from Edge, and from my opinion, and I thought it went well, and a lot of people also did say it went well. So I was really happy to get this experience a second time around. So before I end this video, I just want to give some tips to people, especially people who are might be coming into their first internships whenever you're watching this. And so the first one is centered around imposter syndrome, and it's a very real thing. Now, I've been developing software at some level for quite some time, much longer than the average college senior, but even I still experience imposter syndrome. There were many times that I would be in one-on-one meetings with my mentor, and I would just feel so dumb and feel like, oh, he's thinking, oh, this guy is just so ridiculously dumb, how did he get in here? Now, I'm sure deep down he doesn't think that, or at least I hope he doesn't think that, but we're talking about irrationality, and that's pretty much what imposter syndrome is. So some things to combat imposter syndrome: don't think, or don't think that people expect you to know everything, right? You are an intern, and especially if this is your first internship, or if this is your first internship at a certain company, there's a period of ramp up that needs to happen, right? You're coming in without knowing much of anything about the code base that you're working in, so don't underestimate the amount of time that it takes to learn and understand these things, especially if you're not only learning the code base and the best practices of that team, but if you're also learning the programming language that they're using for the first time as well. So you need to cut yourself some slack, give yourself a break, and don't be too hard on yourself, pretty much. The next thing I would say is rely on your team members for help, especially if you have a mentor. They're there for a reason, and hopefully you're on a healthy team, in the sense that when you reach out to somebody else, let's say if your mentor is busy, that person would be able to spare a minute or two, or an hour in my case sometimes, to help you and explain things to you, and give you a hand, etc., etc. And another thing I will say is try your best to tackle issues on your own before you reach out for help. Even with me, sometimes I don't even follow this instruction. Sometimes as soon as I run into an issue, all of my experience with debugging, or looking up issues, etc., etc., just goes out the window, and I just straight up reach for help. That's not a very good habit to condone. The best thing to do is, okay, you run into an issue, read documentation, read helpful guides. Sometimes in some companies, most companies I've worked for anyways, there's lots of guides that other employees have created on how to do certain things. So read through those, go through those, and then if you've done all that and you still can't figure it out, then you can reach out for help. At the same time, that's kind of like a double-edged sword, because there's the famous saying, you can spend 3 hours working on something, trying to fix something, whereas if you had reached out for help, the first hour in, and talked to somebody who knows what they were doing for 5 minutes, you could have figured out what the issue was, right? So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, but at least spend some time, dedicated time, trying to figure out what the issue is, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, or maybe even longer. And if you're still blocked, then you reach out for help. So the next tip I want to give is around staying organized. And so what I do, and what I did throughout my 2020 internship, my 2021 internship, was I kept a daily log of all the tasks that I wanted to complete that day. So I was using OneNote, and I literally had a bullet point, or a checkbox list of things that I would do. Number one on my list is read all my emails. So that's usually the first thing I do as soon as I turn my computer on. I just read all the emails. Number two thing is attend all meetings for the day. And then everything else was whatever that I personally wanted to accomplish, whether it related to my project or to networking, or just any other goal that I wanted to accomplish for the internship. So not every single day, but at least 95% of the days of my 12-week internship, you know, I have a recorded list of to-dos for each of those days. And the last tip that I want to leave is networking. It's really, really important to reach out to people. You know, the first set of people you should network with are people on your team. One thing I did was within like the first week or so, I reached out to my skip manager. So that's my manager's manager. Scheduled a meeting with her. I scheduled a meeting with my manager, but usually that happens by default. Scheduled a meeting with my mentor, also happens by default. But I also scheduled a meeting with some of the senior devs on my team, just to talk to them one-on-one, get to know, ask them questions, get to know what they're like, etc., etc., get to know what the team is like. This year, I also reached out to my manager and a few other people that I from my team from 2020, from last year, just to keep the networking going. And you know, if there are any networking programs or activities or events that are happening throughout your internship, be sure to enroll in them, be sure to participate in as much as you can. And believe me, as somebody with social anxiety disorder, I know how hard it can be to network and socialize. I'm really grateful for the remote atmosphere, or the remote system that happened last year and this year, because you know, I can easily, you know, psych myself into it before a meeting starts, you know, sitting in this chair, or you know, easily calm myself down after a meeting ends, because that's something that I need to do. But yeah, so believe me, I know how difficult it can be, but it's definitely a very, very valuable thing to try and network as hard as you can and take the opportunities as they present themselves. So yeah, that's my internship experience at Microsoft. I talked a little bit about my 2020 internship. I talked a lot more about the one I just did, my 2021 internship. All in all, I'm very, very much satisfied with the experience I had. I think Microsoft is a great place to intern at, to work at. The culture there is pretty nice. The people that I've encountered in, you know, my 2 summers of working there are extremely nice, extremely helpful, and extremely talented at what they do. The friends I've made are extremely great. You know, it's not about the destination, it's the friends you make along the way. Yeah. But yeah, there I really don't have much or anything to complain about my time at Microsoft. It's been awesome. And yeah, so thank you for watching this video. Feel free to start conversations or ask questions about anything in the comments section, or wherever you see this video posted on LinkedIn or IG, anywhere. Yeah, thank you so much for the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck to you. God bless.